Raymond Blackwell had not slept in 3 days. That was not unusual for him. Sleep was something ordinary men needed, men who punched time cards and waited for paychecks and worried about grocery bills. Raymond Blackwell was not ordinary. He was, by every measure that mattered in the world of high finance and global industry, extraordinary. He was worth somewhere north of $1.3 trillion. Some financial magazines put the number higher. Raymond himself had stopped paying close attention to the exact figure several years ago. Numbers that large had a way of losing their meaning. They became more like geography than money, vast and impossible to fully picture. He had built his fortune from almost nothing. That was the part people always wanted to hear about at galas and business dinners, the part he had told so many times that it had polished itself smooth like a river stone. Born in the small coastal city of Harborview, the son of a dockworker father and a seamstress mother, Raymond had grown up in a narrow house on Crestline Avenue, where the walls were thin and the winters were long. His parents had worked hard every day of their lives and died without much to show for it except 2 strong hands, a small insurance policy, and one son who had watched them carefully and decided very early on that he would do things differently. He had started his first business at age 19, a modest logistics company that moved shipments between Harborview and the larger port cities along the coast. He had driven the truck himself for the first 2 years. Then he had hired drivers. Then he had bought more trucks. Then he had started thinking about the inefficiencies he kept seeing in the shipping routes, the wasted fuel, the poorly timed departures, the contracts that expired and were never renegotiated. He had ideas about all of it, big, restless, hungry ideas. By the time he was 30, the logistics company had become something larger, a supply chain operation with contracts across 4 states. By 40, he had pivoted into renewable energy infrastructure, which was the kind of decision that people laughed at the time and made them very quiet later. By 55, Blackwell Global Holdings was a conglomerate with fingers in energy, technology, maritime transport, data infrastructure, and a dozen other sectors that most people had never heard of, but that quietly made the modern world function. Raymond was now 62 years old. His hair had gone the silver white of a winter sky. His face carried the particular kind of weathering that came not from the outdoors, but from decades of fluorescent boardrooms and transatlantic flights and negotiations that stretched through nights and into early mornings. He was a tall man, still broad through the shoulders, and he moved with the deliberate economy of someone who had learned long ago that every second had a value, and none of them should be wasted. He had been in Singapore for 11 days, attending the close of a massive offshore wind energy deal that had required 18 months of negotiations, 3 rounds of government approvals, and what felt like 1,000 cups of bad conference room coffee. The deal was done now, signed. The numbers had been verified, the handshakes exchanged, the photographs taken for the press releases. Raymond had sat in the back of the car to the airport and allowed himself exactly 4 minutes of satisfaction before his mind had moved on to the next thing. His daughter, Sophia. "No," he said finally. "I'll go home first." Marcus nodded and made a note. He did not say anything else. He had worked for Raymond Blackwell for 9 years. He knew which silences to leave alone.
Sophia Blackwell was 24 years old, and she was, by every standard her father understood, a puzzle he had never quite managed to solve. She had been a quiet child, not sad, not difficult, just quiet. Where Raymond had always filled every room he entered with presence and agenda, Sophia had a way of making herself small, of sitting in corners with books, of watching things carefully before she spoke. Her mother, Elaine, had been the same way. Elaine had been a landscape architect, a gentle, thoughtful woman who cared about the way light fell across garden beds in the afternoon and the particular shade of green that certain mosses turned after rain. She and Raymond had met at a charity event when they were both young and still surprised by the world, and they had loved each other in the way that two very different people sometimes do, completely and a little confusedly. Elaine had died of cancer when Sophia was 12. It had been fast and it had been terrible, and neither Raymond nor Sophia had ever fully recovered from it, though they had, in their different ways, tried to behave as though they had. In the years after Elaine's death, Raymond had done what he knew how to do. He had worked, he had provided, he had sent Sophia to the best schools and hired the best tutors and made sure she wanted for nothing material. He had attended her important performances when he could and missed the less important ones when he couldn't. He had called her every Sunday, or tried to. He had tried. The problem, which he had never been able to clearly name and therefore had never been able to fix, was that he did not know how to be with her in the uncomplicated way that fathers were supposed to be with daughters. There was always a gap between them, not hostility, nothing that simple, just a kind of distance, like two people who spoke different languages and had never quite found a translator. Sophia had graduated from Harborview University with a degree in social work. Raymond had paid for it without complaint, though he had privately hoped she might choose something more. He always stopped himself before completing the thought, because he recognized the shape of it and didn't like what it said about him. She had graduated top of her class. He had been there for the ceremony, sitting in the front row in a seat that had been quietly arranged by his security team, and he had watched her walk across the stage and accepted her diploma with both hands and a small, private smile, and he had felt something large and unclear in his chest that he had not known what to do with. After graduation, Sophia had told him she wanted to work in social services. She wanted to help people who were struggling. She had used words like community and dignity and ground-level change, and Raymond had listened to all of it and nodded, and then, because he was Raymond Blackwell, and this was how his mind worked, he had offered to fund an entire non-profit organization for her to run. He could have it set up within a month. Staff, offices, budget, whatever she needed. Sophia had looked at him for a long, quiet moment. "That's not what I mean, Dad," she had said. "It would be more effective. You could help more people. I want to actually be there. I want to actually do the work, not manage it from an office. Do it." He had not understood. He had tried to, but he had not. And 3 weeks later, Sophia had moved out of the Blackwell estate and into a small apartment in the East Side district of Harborview, and she had been living there for 18 months now. Raymond paid her nothing, she had refused, and he had respected that, or tried to. They spoke on the phone every few weeks. The conversations were careful and a little formal, like letters written by strangers who shared blood. He had not visited her apartment. He had told himself this was because he was busy. The Singapore trip alone had consumed most of the last 2 months. Before that, there had been a merger negotiation in Frankfurt. Before that, a congressional hearing in Washington. There was always something. But sitting on the jet over the Pacific, Raymond Blackwell admitted to himself, in the clear and cold way he admitted things he didn't like, that the real reason he hadn't visited was that he didn't know what to say when he got there. And he was 62 years old and worth more money than most countries, and the idea of walking into his daughter's small apartment and standing there helplessly was the closest thing to fear he had felt in a long time. "Where exactly are we going?" Marcus asked. "Home. The estate. I'll call Sophia from there." He turned back to the Nevada report, but the numbers blurred a little, and he found himself reading the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing it. The Blackwell estate sat on 12 acres above the western edge of Harborview on a ridge called Meridian Hill that looked out over the bay in one direction and the city in the other. The main house was a 19-room building of stone and glass that had been extensively renovated under Elaine's direction 20 years ago, and that still carried, in the arrangement of the gardens and the particular way the light was channeled through certain windows, the mark of her sensibility. Raymond had thought about selling it after she died. Too many rooms, too many echoes. But he hadn't. He wasn't sure if that was sentimentality or stubbornness. Probably both. The household staff consisted of 12 people, a head housekeeper named Mrs. Dorothea Prentice, a chef named Gabriel, groundskeepers, cleaners, a maintenance manager, a security team. Mrs. Prentice had been with the household for 17 years. She ran it with calm, unflappable efficiency and had a talent for making herself invisible that Raymond had always deeply appreciated. The car arrived at the estate at 7:15 in the morning. Raymond had, against all expectation, slept for 4 hours on the jet. He felt almost human. The gates opened automatically, the gravel crunched under the tires, and the main house came into view through a line of old oak trees that Elaine had insisted on keeping when they renovated. He had expected the familiar quiet of the house, the slight hush of a large space with most of its rooms unoccupied. He had expected coffee and the morning papers, and perhaps a brief update from Mrs. Prentice about anything that had arisen during his absence. What he had not expected was to see the lights on in the east wing at 7 in the morning and to hear, faintly, the sound of movement inside. Mrs. Prentice met him at the front door. She was a compact woman in her mid-50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back efficiently and reading glasses perched on her forehead. Her expression, as always, was professionally calm, but there was something in it today, a faint tension around the eyes that Raymond noticed. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. Welcome home. I trust the Singapore meetings went well?" "They did. Thank you, Dorothea." He handed his coat to Marcus and looked toward the east wing. "Is someone here?" A brief pause, not long enough to be suspicious, just long enough to be notable. "Miss Sophia arrived 3 days ago, sir." Raymond stopped. "She called and asked if she might stay for a few days. I told her, of course. She is welcome here whenever she wishes, as you've always said. She has been staying in her old room." "She didn't tell me she was coming." "No, sir." A gentle pause. "I believe she may have assumed you'd be in Singapore a while longer." Raymond processed this. Sophia had come home without telling him. She was here, in the house, and had been here for 3 days. "Is she sleeping?" he asked. It was just past 7. Mrs. Prentice's expression shifted in a way he couldn't quite read. "No, sir. She's been up since 5. She's been—" Another pause, this one slightly longer. "She's been helping with the morning cleaning routines. She asked if she could. I didn't want to refuse her." Raymond looked at his housekeeper for a moment. "She's been cleaning?" "Yes, sir. She said she wanted to do something useful while she was here. She's been very—" she searched for the word— "thorough." Raymond left his luggage with Marcus and walked through the front hall toward the east wing. The estate in the early morning had a particular quality of light. The sun came in low through the tall windows and laid long, pale bars across the stone floors and the Persian rugs. The portraits in the main corridor watched him as he passed. 3 generations of Blackwells looked down from those frames, or rather 2 generations plus a few additions. His parents, himself, Elaine, and one large portrait of Sophia at age 16 that Elaine had commissioned the year before she got sick. He passed the library, the formal dining room, the small sitting room that no one ever used. He could hear something now, the soft sound of movement, a door opening, the muffled thump of something being moved. He followed the sound to the end of the east corridor, to the large receiving room that had been closed up since the last event Raymond had hosted there,
a company board dinner 6 months ago. The door was open. He stood in the doorway and did not move for a long moment. The receiving room was a large, formal space, high ceilings, heavy drapes, long mahogany table, a grand piano in one corner that had not been played since Elaine died. It was not a room that was cleaned regularly. It was covered when not in use and opened only for specific occasions. It had been closed for 6 months, which meant there had been dust on every surface, and the drapes had accumulated the slow, gray sediment of half a year of disuse. Sophia was on her hands and knees on the far side of the room. She was wearing old clothes, dark leggings, a faded gray sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled back in a practical knot. She had a scrub brush in one hand and a bucket of soapy water beside her, and she was cleaning the baseboard along the far wall with the focused, thorough attention of someone who cared about doing the job correctly. The morning light came through the gap she made in the drapes and fell across her in a long, pale column. She hadn't heard him come in. She was humming something very softly, not quite a song, just a low, absent sound she made when she was concentrating. I recognized it. She had hummed that way as a child, when she was drawing or reading. I hadn't heard it in years. I had almost forgotten it. Raymond Blackwell stood in the doorway of his own receiving room, in the house he had built and paid for and filled with the trappings of an extraordinary life, and he watched his 24-year-old daughter scrub a baseboard on her hands and knees, and something happened to him that he was entirely unprepared for. He froze. Not from shock, exactly, not from confusion. He froze because he was suddenly seeing something with a clarity that he hadn't had in a long time, possibly ever. And the clarity was so sharp and so unexpected that it physically stopped him. She wasn't doing this because she had to. She wasn't here because she was in trouble. She hadn't come home because she needed something from him. She had come home and she was cleaning a room that didn't need cleaning, that had staff to clean it, staff that had been cleaning this house for years, because she was the kind of person who, when she was somewhere, wanted to be useful, who couldn't sit still in a comfortable house while other people worked, who needed to do things with her hands, to make something cleaner or better or more organized, not because anyone was watching and not for any reward. He thought about what she had said 18 months ago. I want to actually be there. I want to actually do the work. He had thought she meant social work. He had thought she was talking about her job. Standing in the doorway now, he understood that she meant something larger than that. She meant her whole life. Sophia moved the bucket along the baseboard and started on the next section. She was still humming. The room smelled of soap and the particular clean dustiness of old drapes being disturbed. Raymond, in the course of his career, made decisions that shaped the energy grids of 3 countries. He had sat across tables from prime ministers and tech titans and men who controlled more money than most people could imagine. He had never been, in any of those moments, at a loss. He was at a loss now. He stood there for what might have been 2 minutes, or 5, he genuinely could not tell. Then Sophia moved the bucket again and happened to look up, and she saw him. She didn't startle exactly, but she sat back on her heels, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the length of the receiving room with all of its accumulated silence and memory between them. "Dad?" she said. Her voice was careful, soft, waiting. "Sophia," he said. Neither of them said anything for a few seconds. "You're back early," she said. Singapore wrapped up. He looked at the bucket, the scrub brush, the open drapes. He looked at her face, which was unchanged from the last time he'd seen it. The same serious, dark eyes, the same clean, spare features, the same look that he had always found faintly inscrutable. Her mother's look. "You didn't tell me you were coming. I didn't think you'd be here." She paused. "I'm sorry. I should have called." "Don't apologize for coming home," he said. It came out more roughly than he intended. He saw her register it. "I'm not apologizing for coming home," she said, with a gentleness that somehow made it feel like a correction. "I'm apologizing for not letting you know." He helped her put the cleaning supplies away. She didn't ask him to, and he didn't announce that he was going to. He just picked up.
After breakfast, Raymond called Marcus and told him to hold the morning meetings. Marcus, who had learned in 9 years to hear the things Raymond didn't say as clearly as the things he did, said he would reschedule and asked no further questions. Raymond found Sophia in the receiving room. She had opened all the drapes now, and the room was full of the cold November light. She was standing at the grand piano, not playing it, just standing near it with one hand resting lightly on the lid, looking out the window at the bay in the distance. "Mom used to play this," Sophia said, without turning around. "I know," Raymond said. He stood in the doorway, then came in. The room looked different with the light on it, larger and somehow more itself than it did when it was closed up and covered. "I took lessons for a year after she died. Did you know that?" Raymond felt something shift in him. "I didn't know that." "I didn't tell you. I thought—" She turned from the window. "I thought you might think it was strange, sad. I didn't want you to worry." He looked at his daughter, 24 years old, serious and clear-eyed, standing in the light of a room she had cleaned on her hands and knees before 7 in the morning. He thought about all the things she had not told him because she hadn't wanted him to worry. How many years of those things there must be by now. "Did you keep playing?" he asked. "For a while, then I got busy with school." She paused. "Do you play?" No. He had never learned. He had always meant to, and had never found the time. Another thing that had always been scheduled for later, and had never arrived. Sophia opened the piano lid and pressed one key, a clear, bright note that hung in the air of the room and slowly faded. She pressed another. The piano was slightly out of tune, which was expected after 6 months of disuse, but not terribly so. "I could get a tuner in," Sophia said. "It's okay," she said. "It's actually kind of nice. Honest, almost." She played a simple scale, slowly, feeling for the notes. Her fingers found them without hesitation. "Like it's been waiting." Raymond sat down in one of the chairs near the piano. He watched his daughter play a quiet, simple melody. Nothing he recognized, probably something she was working out as she went, and he stayed very still and listened. And the receiving room was full of November light, and the smell of soap, and something old in particular that had been waiting underneath the dust. He thought about all the years of missed Sundays and rescheduled calls, and the way he had always assumed there would be time later for the kinds of conversations that mattered. He had built an empire on his ability to see where things were going and plan accordingly, to anticipate and prepare, to never be caught without a strategy. He had, somehow, managed to completely fail to apply any of that foresight to the most important relationship in his life. Sophia stopped playing and looked at him. "What are you thinking about?" "Your mother," he said. It surprised him that he said it. It was true. She nodded slowly. "Me too." She closed the piano lid, carefully, the way you'd close a book that meant something. "She would have liked that you came home early." "I came home to review some reports," Raymond said, and then heard himself say it and felt a particular kind of tiredness he hadn't felt before, the tiredness of a story that no longer quite worked. Sophia looked at him with her steady, serious eyes. She didn't have to. They walked the grounds after that. It had been Sophia's idea. She said she'd been walking the grounds every morning since she arrived, which is how she'd noticed that the east garden wall needed some attention and that the pathway along the north fence had become overgrown. She had mentioned these things to the groundskeeping team on her second day, she said, not to be critical, just because she'd noticed them, and they were very polite about it. Raymond noticed as they walked that she was paying attention to everything. The way she moved through the grounds was different from the way he moved through them. He walked through the estate the way he walked through a building he owned, which is to say he saw it as a structure, an asset,
a thing to be maintained. Sophia walked through it like the way her mother had, like someone who saw it as a living place, with details and small conditions that were worth attending to. She pointed out the way the light came through the oak trees this hour, laying complex shadows on the frost-whitened grass. She noticed a bird's nest in the old hedgerow along the east wall, tucked in so neatly it might have been designed by an architect. She stopped at the garden bed near the south terrace, the bed that had been Elaine's particular project, the one she had redesigned 3 times and talked about endlessly and loved with a specificity that Raymond had always found mystifying and slightly charming. She crouched down and looked at the late November earth. "The hellebores are coming," she said. "Look." She pointed to something near the base of a woody stem that Raymond could barely distinguish from the surrounding soil. Raymond crouched beside her and looked, and she was right. There was the faintest suggestion of dark green emerging at the base of the plant, a tiny, determined unfurling. "Your mother planted those," he said. "I know." Sophia touched the stem very lightly with one finger. "They're survivors, hellebores. They bloom in winter when everything else is dead," she said. "Mom said that's why she liked them." Raymond stood up too. The cold air came off the bay, and the frost crackled under their feet, and the estate was quiet except for the distant sound of the groundskeeping team working somewhere on the other side of the property. "Sophia," he said. She looked at him. "I'm sorry for the way I've been, for all the years of—" He stopped. He was discovering, very good at this. He had prepared speeches for shareholder meetings. He had given talks at conferences that later said had changed the way people thought about energy infrastructure. He could not, at this moment, find the words for this particular sentence. Sophia waited. She was patient in the way she had always been patient, not resigned, just genuinely willing to wait. "For being absent," he said finally. "Not just physically, for not—" He looked at the garden bed with its faint green promise underneath the cold earth. "For not learning to be with you." Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know you tried." "Not hard enough." "No," she agreed, but she said it without cruelty. "But I think you're here now." She looked at him with the steady, serious eyes that were her own and no one else's, and there was in them a warmth that he realized had always been there, that had been there all along, waiting, the same way the hellebores were waiting under the cold ground. He nodded. He didn't trust himself to say more. They finished the walk in mostly silence, the comfortable kind.
Raymond found Mrs. Prentice in the kitchen later that afternoon, reviewing the household accounts in her usual methodical way. He sat down across from her, which was an unusual enough occurrence that she looked up and set down her reading glasses. "The cleaning this morning, Sophia. Has she been doing that every day?" "Yes, sir. She asked if she could help, and I showed her the supply closet. She made her own schedule." Mrs. Prentice paused. "She's very thorough. Better than thorough, actually. She works the way—" She stopped. "The way what?" Mrs. Prentice considered her words. "She works the way people do when they genuinely care about it, not the way people work when they're doing a favor or trying to be polite. When she cleans something, she's thinking about who lives here, who uses the space, whether it will be comfortable and welcoming for them." She paused again. "I've been in household management for 30 years, Mr. Blackwell. That quality is rarer than you'd think." Raymond absorbed this. "She's like Mrs. Blackwell in some ways," Mrs. Prentice added, and her voice was careful, the way voices got when they touched on something that had been carefully avoided for a long time. "Not in manner, exactly, but in the way of attending to things." Raymond was quiet for a moment. "Elaine used to worry that I worked too much. She used to say that I'd built a magnificent structure and forgotten to live in it." "Yes, sir," Mrs. Prentice said, in the tone of someone confirming something they had always known. Raymond looked at the kitchen window, the bay in the distance, the gray November light on the water. "She was right,"
he said. It was not a confessional statement. It was the kind of acknowledgement he made in business when a strategy had not worked and it was time to adapt. Clean, unambiguous, actionable. "Yes, sir," Mrs. Prentice said again, with the warmth of someone who had waited 17 years to hear exactly that. He found the notebook that evening. He had gone into the small sitting room to look for a book. The shelf in there held a mix of Elaine's novels and his own business volumes, and a miscellany of things that had accumulated over the years. And he had seen, on the side table, a notebook with a worn, dark cover. He wouldn't have thought anything of it, but it was sitting open, and the handwriting visible on the page was Sophia's, small and even, the way she had always written. He did not read it. He started to look away, meaning to leave it alone, but then he saw the header at the top of the open page in larger letters, underlined, "Things to Tell Dad." He stopped. He stood there for a moment. Then he sat down, slowly, in the chair near the side table, and looked at the page without quite reading it. Things to Tell Dad. It was a list. He could see the structure of it without reading the specifics. A list of items, some short, some longer, some with little marks beside them that might be checkboxes or question marks or something else. He couldn't tell without reading, and he was not going to read it because it was hers and it was private. But the existence of it was enough. His daughter kept a list of things to tell him. She carried a notebook with a list of things to tell him. She had been keeping track. She had been wanting to say things, and she had been writing them down, presumably because the conversations were hard to have, because the openings didn't always come, because they had both gotten so used to careful surface-level communication that going deeper required preparation. He thought about his own version of that notebook, not a physical one, because he didn't keep things like that, but the mental equivalent. The things he had wanted to say to her over the years and hadn't. The trip to Portland when she was 15 that he canceled and then never rescheduled. The graduation party he left early because of a time zone emergency call. The times she had said something real and he had responded with something practical, because practical was the language he knew. He got up and put the notebook back exactly as he had found it. He did not mention it to Sophia that evening at dinner. But at dinner, when they were sitting with Gabriel's soup and the good bread and the last light fading over the bay, Raymond said, "Tell me about the family, the one you mentioned at breakfast, the one that got into the apartment." And Sophia looked at him across the table for a moment with those steady, waiting eyes, and then she told him. She told him about the mother, whose name was Carla, and the 2 kids, a girl of 8 and a boy of 6, and the months of forms and assessments and waiting lists, and a landlord who had changed the terms twice, and a caseworker colleague who had nearly given up, and a phone call at 11 at night that Sophia had taken sitting on the floor of her kitchen that had turned out to be the breakthrough call, the one that changed the shape of everything. She talked for almost an hour. Raymond did not look at his phone once. He refilled her wine glass once, and his own once, and asked 3 or 4 questions that were genuine questions, not conversational placeholders, but questions he actually wanted the answers to. And Sophia answered them, and the conversation grew the way real conversations grow, spreading out into places neither of them had planned. They talked about her work, and then about his, and then about the city, which had changed in the years they each had been busy with their separate lives. They talked about Harborview, the old neighborhoods and the new ones, the parts that had improved and the parts that were struggling. Sophia told him about the communities she worked with, the specifics, the textures of daily difficulty and daily resilience, and he listened with the full attention he usually reserved for things that had a clear stake attached. And he could see it, the world she was describing, the people in it, the way small changes cascaded into large ones, or didn't. "You care about this deeply," he said. It was an obvious observation, but he made it because he wanted to say it. "Yes," she said, simply. "I understand now," he said, "why you wanted to actually be there." She looked at him. Something changed slightly in her expression, an opening, a lessening of the habitual careful neutrality that she wore around him. "Do you?" she asked, not challenging, just genuinely asking. I think I do. He turned his wineglass slowly in his hands. I spent a long time thinking that scale was the measure, that the bigger the operation, the more good it did. I still believe that, to some extent. What we're doing in renewable energy, the infrastructure work, it will matter on a level that individual action can't reach. I paused. But I think I used that belief to avoid the smaller scale, to avoid the individual scale. Because the individual scale is harder to systematize. You can't reduce it to a report. Sophia was quiet for a moment. No, she said, you can't. The family, Carla and the kids. Yes? What do they need now that they're in the apartment? Sophia looked at him steadily. A lot of things. Carla needs job training. She had a medical billing background, but she's been out of the workforce for 3 years. The kids need tutoring. They fell behind during the instability. The little one, Marcus, the boy, he's been having some trouble adjusting. Normal trouble, given everything. But he'd benefit from some consistency, an after-school program, something structured. Dad, she said it gently but clearly, you can't just write a check. I know, but I can help find the resources. I have contacts at the Harborview Community Foundation. I can make an introduction, not a donation, an introduction, and you can decide what to do with it. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Something that might have been the beginning of a smile crossed her face. An introduction, she said, not a takeover. Not a takeover, he agreed. I'm trying to learn the difference. The smile arrived properly this time. It was her mother's smile, the one that came slowly and meant more than the fast ones. He hadn't seen it in years. He had almost forgotten it. Okay, she said. An introduction would be welcome.
After dinner, they sat in the main sitting room, the one that faced the bay, with the fireplace that Gabriel had lit in honor of the cold night. Raymond didn't use this room often. It was a room for sitting, and he was not generally a person who sat without a purpose. But he sat in it now, with his daughter across from him and the fire going, and the dark bay invisible beyond the windows, and the sitting felt purposeful enough. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said. "Yes." "Why did you come home first, before the office, I mean? Marcus told me you had meetings scheduled for 8. A pause. "I hope that's okay that Marcus mentioned it. He was just—" "Marcus talks too much," Raymond said, without heat. He looked at the fire. "I came home because I've been telling myself for 3 years that I would slow down, and I keep not doing it. And at some point on the plane last night, I admitted to myself that the reason is I don't know what to do when I slow down." The pause. "I know how to work. I know how to build things and run things and solve problems that have clear parameters. I don't know how to—" He gestured vaguely at the room, the fire, the silence between them. "Be still," Sophia said. "Yes." "Mom said that about you," Sophia said. She was looking at the fire, too. Her voice was careful, the way it always was when she mentioned Elaine. Careful but not avoidant, the way a person speaks about someone they've learned to carry rather than just mourn. "She said you were always going somewhere, always had a destination, that it was one of the things she loved about you, because it meant you were fully alive, always moving towards something." Applause. "But she also said she hoped that one day you'd find out what it was like to just be somewhere." Raymond was very still. "She said that?" "When I was 10, maybe 11, she was in the garden, the south bed, the one with the hellebores. She said it the way she said most things, not as a complaint, just as an observation." Raymond thought about Elaine in the south garden bed, kneeling in the earth with her gardening gloves, and her quiet concentration, making observations about him in a careful voice to their daughter. He thought about all the things she had seen and known, and not fully said, and how much he wished for a moment, with an intensity that surprised him, that he could ask her about it now. "She saw me clearly," he said. "She saw everyone clearly," Sophia said. "It's just who she was."
You're like her in that way, Raymond said. Sophia looked at him. This time, the thing that crossed her face was not just the beginning of something, it was the full arrival. He could see that he had said something that mattered to her. He could see it, and he was glad he had said it. I've always hoped so, she said quietly. I work at it. I don't think you need to work at it. I think it's yours. They sat with that for a while. The fire settled. Outside, the night was clear and cold, and the bay lay invisible in the darkness. Tell me about Singapore, Sophia said eventually. Really? Really. She pulled her legs up under her, the way she had sat on furniture since she was small. Tell me what the deal was. I don't know anything about offshore wind energy. You can explain it simply. He told her. He told her about the offshore wind farm, the scale of it, the way that turbines would be positioned in the shipping lanes off the Singaporean coast, the years of negotiation with the government, the engineering challenges, the reason this one deal would power something like 400,000 homes. He explained it simply, without the language of finance or corporate strategy, just the shape of it, the problem and the solution, and what it would mean in practice. She listened with the same quality of attention she had given to the fire, to the garden, to the piano, to the baseboard she had been scrubbing when he had found her in the morning. That's significant, she said when he finished. Yes. And you did 11 other deals like that this year? Similar scope, different specifics. She was quiet for a moment. I work with one family at a time, she said, and you work with hundreds of thousands of them at once. She tilted her head. Different scales. Both matter. Both matter, he agreed. He thought about the list in the notebook. He thought about the thing she had written down to tell him. Sophia, whatever you've been saving up to say to me, whatever you've been... He stopped, not wanting to reveal that he had seen the notebook. Whatever you've needed to tell me that we haven't found the right time for, I want to hear it. I'm here. She looked at him for a long moment. She was very still. That might take a while, she said. I know. I've got time. She held his gaze for another moment, and he could see her deciding something, weighing something, the way she always did before she spoke the true thing. Okay, she said. She uncurled herself from the chair. Give me a minute. She left the room and came back 2 minutes later with a worn, dark notebook and sat back down in the chair across from him. She set it on her knee, but didn't open it yet. I started keeping this a couple of years ago, things I wanted to tell you or ask you, things I thought about when you called. She looked at him steadily. Some of it is small, some of it isn't. I know, he said. And then, because there was no good reason not to, I saw it on the side table. I didn't read it, but I want to tell you that I spent a long time being angry at you, she said, after Mom died. Not in the way kids are angry at parents for normal things, in a specific way. I was angry that you handled it by leaving, by working more. I knew even then that I understood why. It's what you know how to do. But I was 12 and I needed you to stay, and you kept going. She looked at the notebook. I never told you that. I put it away and I dealt with it the way I deal with things. I analyzed it until it made sense, and then I stopped being angry. But I wanted you to know it happened. Raymond did not immediately say anything. He held what she had said. He did not explain it or defend it or try to reframe it. He just let it be what it was. I know, he said finally. I knew it even then. I didn't know what to do with it, so I pretended not to see it. He looked at her. I'm sorry. Not a business apology. I'm sorry. She nodded. Her eyes were bright but steady. I know, she said. That's why I told you. Because I think you can hear it now. They sat for a moment in the warmth of the fire. Can I tell you something? He said. Yes. I was scared this morning, he said, when I saw you in the receiving room. I stood there for I don't know how long, I couldn't move. Why? He thought about how to say it. Because I could see who you are, he said, very clearly. I could see all of it, the way you work and the way you care about things and the choices you've made and what they mean. And I realized that you became all of that without very much help from me. You became it in spite of the way I handled things, not because of it. He paused. That's a difficult thing to see clearly. Sophia was quiet. But I was also... He stopped. He started again. I was also very glad, to see who you became. I was proud. I've been proud of you for a long time, but I've been proud in the abstract, proud of results, of accomplishments, the degree and the work and the choices. This morning, I was proud of you, of the person. Does that distinction make sense? She was looking at him with the expression he had been trying to read for 24 years. He was beginning to understand it now. It was not inscrutability. It had never been inscrutability. It was care, deep, careful, patient care, looking for the opening that meant it was safe to show itself fully. Yes, she said. It makes sense. She closed the notebook. That's what I wanted to hear most. I didn't have it on the list because I didn't know how to ask for it. A pause. But that's what I came home for. Raymond Blackwell did not sleep well that night, but it was not the restless, insomniac non-sleep of the Singapore trip, the grinding, productive wakefulness of a man with too many open problems. It was a different kind of wakefulness, the kind that comes after something has shifted and the mind is quietly reorganizing itself around the new arrangement of things. He lay in the large bed in the master bedroom and looked at the ceiling, and thought, without urgency, about several things. He thought about the offshore wind project and the 400,000 homes. He thought about Carla and her 2 children in the apartment they had just gotten into. He thought about scale, large and small, the way Sophia had described it at dinner. Both matter. He thought about the list in the notebook and all the years of unsaid things that had accumulated while he was building an empire and telling himself there would be time later. There was time now. He got up at 6, slightly before the winter sunrise, and went downstairs. The kitchen was quiet. Jabriel didn't arrive until 7. Raymond made coffee himself, using the machine that Jabriel had selected and that Raymond had never operated, and made 2 cups by the method of pressing buttons that seemed logical and being pleasantly surprised when something drinkable came out. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee in the pre-dawn darkness outside the windows when he heard footsteps on the stairs. He recognized their pattern. Sophia's walk, the quick, purposeful morning sound of someone who was already fully awake. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in her old clothes, hair back, and stopped when she saw him. "You're up early." I could say the same. She looked at the coffee machine, at the 2 cups. She came in and picked up the second cup, which she had made on the reasonable assumption that she would appear, and looked at it. "You made this?" "Don't look so surprised." "I'm not surprised," in a tone that suggested some surprise. She sat down from him. They sat with their coffee for a moment, in the comfortable pre-dawn quiet of the before sunrise. "I was thinking," Raymond said, "about what I said last night, about learning how to be still." "Yes?" "I'm going to take 2 weeks off, properly off. Marcus will manage the schedule. There's nothing in the next 2 weeks that he can't handle or defer. I want to be here, in the house, with you, if you're staying." Sophia held her coffee cup in both hands and looked at him with the steady, waiting quality that he was learning, finally, to read correctly. "I was planning to go back Sunday," she said, "but I could stay longer. I have some flexibility this week, a planning flexibility." A pause. "I could take a few more days." "Take a few more days," he said. She nodded. "Then, what would we do for 2 weeks? What does Raymond Blackwell do when he's being still?" He thought about this. "I don't entirely know yet." I think that might be the point. The corner of her mouth moved. Okay, she said. We can figure it out. I thought we could get the piano tuned, if you wanted to keep playing. She looked at him for a moment. You want to listen? Yes. All right. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. And I was thinking, the south garden, the hellebore bed, it could use some work. The ground is hard, but there are some things to do before the real cold sets in. I was going to ask the groundkeeping team, but if you wanted to, I'll do it. I don't know anything about gardening. I'll show you. It's not complicated. Mostly it's just attention. Mostly it's just attention. He thought about that. All right, he said. We'll start in the garden. Sophia stood up, finished her coffee, rinsed her cup in the sink with the efficiency of someone who didn't leave messes behind. At the kitchen doorway, she paused. I'm going to do the front hall, the floors. They need a proper going over. Raymond looked at her, in her old clothes, practical and awake, planning her morning around things that needed doing. I'll help, he said. She looked back at him, and the expression on her face was the full arrival of the thing he had been watching for all morning, all year, possibly for the better part of 24 years. Okay, she said, quietly, warmly. Come on then.
The south garden at the Blackwell estate was in bloom in May. The hellebores had come fully in March, dark and determined, exactly as Sophia had said they would, and the beds that Elaine had designed 20 years ago were filling in with the layered, considered arrangement that had been waiting dormant through the cold months, held in reserve until the conditions were right. Raymond had spent those 6 months differently than any 6 months he could remember in recent history. Not retired, he was not built for retirement and had no interest in it, but changed in the specific way that things change when they have been examined honestly and found to need revision. He had taken the 2 weeks. He had learned to work in the garden, slowly, badly at first, then better. He had listened to Sophia play the piano in the mornings, the tuner having come and gone, and the instrument restored to something clear and true. He had had, over those 2 weeks and the months that followed, a long, ongoing, intermittently awkward and increasingly comfortable conversation with his daughter that had covered most of the list in the notebook and a great many things that had never been on any list because they had emerged naturally, the way things do when you stop managing time and just spend it. He had made the introduction to the Harbor View Community Foundation. Sophia had, with characteristic independence, taken it exactly as far as she wanted and no further, which was to say, she had secured funding for an after-school program at the school Carla's children attended and a job training partnership for 3 families in her current caseload. She had called Raymond to tell him it had worked, and the call had lasted 45 minutes, and they had talked about it, and about 6 other things as well. He had, in the margins of all of this, done something else. He had called his board together and announced the creation of the Elaine Blackwell Foundation, funded substantially from his own holdings, dedicated to community-level social infrastructure, housing stability, youth programs, family support services. Not an abstract foundation with a famous name attached to a large check, a working foundation with staff and programs and measurable outcomes, operating at the scale Sophia understood, the scale of one family at a time, replicated with the resources that his scale made possible. Sophia had heard about this from Marcus before Raymond had the chance to tell him himself. She called him immediately. "You named it after Mom," she said. "Yes," he said. A long pause on the line. "She would have," Sophia started, stopped. I heard her take a breath. "She would have loved it and been embarrassed by it at the same time. You know that, right?" "I do," he said. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was low and clear and full of the thing that had always been in it, waiting for the opening. "Thank you, Dad." "Thank you," he said, and meant it.
On the Sunday in May when the hellebores were full and the south garden was in bloom, Raymond Blackwell walked the grounds of the Meridian Hill estate in the late afternoon light. He walked slowly, which was new for him, and he looked at things as he went. The way the light changed in the oak alley, the new growth on the east hedgerow where the bird had nested in November, the garden bed his wife had loved and his daughter tended, and that was, in the way of all things that have been properly cared for, more beautiful now than it had ever been. He was not going anywhere. He had nowhere to be for the next 4 hours. Sophia was coming to dinner. Not staying. She had her own life, in her own apartment, and her own carefully tended independence, but coming to dinner and bringing her colleague Priya, who she had mentioned and wanted him to meet. He stood at the edge of the south garden and looked at the hellebores and thought about something his daughter had said on a cold November morning, crouching in the frost-white grass with her finger touching the first thin green emergence of a plant that bloomed in winter because that was what it did. They're survivors. They bloom when everything else is dead. He looked at the garden. He thought about Elaine, and about Sophia, and about the particular quality of the light in the late afternoon that he had not, in 62 years of living in this city, ever properly stopped to notice. He thought about a notebook with a list in it, and a scrub brush, and a piano coming back into tune, and a 24-year-old woman who had come home to be in the house where her mother was, who had gotten up before dawn to clean a room that no one had asked her to clean. He thought about the moment in the doorway when he had found her, when something had shifted, when the clarity had been sharp enough to stop him cold. He had been frozen in that doorway by something most people would find ordinary, a young woman cleaning a floor. But he had spent decades building structures, optimizing systems, looking at the world through the lens of scale and efficiency and measurable impact. He had almost completely missed the other lens, the one that Elaine had always used, the one that Sophia had inherited and refined and carried forward into a difficult world. The lens that saw what was right in front of you and attended to it fully for its own sake. He was learning. He was late in the learning, but he was in it. The November light was pale and cold. The May light was warm on his face now. And the garden was blooming, and in a few hours his daughter would come to dinner, and they would sit at the table that Elaine had sat at and talk for a long time about things that mattered. Raymond Blackwell stayed where he was and let the afternoon light fall on him and did not reach for his phone. For a while, not long, but long enough, he was simply somewhere. That, he thought, was something. It was, it turned out, quite a lot.
There is a particular kind of silence that large, old houses hold when no one is watching them. Not emptiness, something richer than that. The silence of a house that has absorbed decades of ordinary mornings, of voices that rose and fell in its rooms, of footsteps on its stairs at every hour of the night and day. It holds all of it the way old wood holds heat, slowly, deeply, in a way that doesn't announce itself, but is simply present when you press your hand against it. The Blackwell estate had been holding things for a long time. In the week that followed Raymond's return from Singapore, a week he had not planned and could not have predicted, the house seemed to wake up in some inarticulate way, the way houses do when the people in them begin to actually live in them, rather than simply passing through. Gabriel began making larger breakfasts, not because anyone asked him to, but because he could hear the two of them up early and moving around, and it seemed right. Mrs. Prentice arranged the sitting room flowers differently, with less formality, the way they had been arranged when Elaine was alive. The groundskeeping team, emboldened by Sophia's notices about the garden wall and the north path, began a systematic review of the estate's neglected corners with a quiet, professional enthusiasm that suggested they had been waiting for someone to care. Raymond noticed all of it and said nothing about it, because there was nothing to say. It was the house adjusting itself to the new arrangement of things. He was adjusting too.
He spent a morning in the library, which was the room he had used most regularly in his years alone in the house, not for reading mostly, but for phone calls, because the acoustics were good and the room felt private. He looked at the shelves now with different eyes. Elaine's novels were still there, 2 shelves of them, organized in her system, which was chronological by when she had read them rather than alphabetically by author. He could tell this from the wear patterns on the spines and the handwritten dates she had put on the inside covers. He hadn't opened those books since she died. He pulled one out now, a novel by a writer he didn't recognize, with a date written inside that he recognized immediately. The spring before she was diagnosed. The year they had taken a family holiday to Portugal, the 3 of them, the last good long holiday before the world changed. Sophia was 11. She had collected rocks on every beach they visited and filled both her and Raymond's pockets with them until he had laughed and complained and carried them anyway. He stood in the library with the novel in his hands and thought about Portugal, about Sophia at 11, serious and bright-eyed, crouching on the wet sand at the edge of the surf to examine something she'd found, about Elaine reading in the shade of an umbrella, occasionally looking up to say something perfectly observed about the light or the landscape that Raymond had half heard and half ignored because he had been on his phone. He had been on his phone, in Portugal, during the last good long holiday. He put the novel back. He did not dwell in the memory the way some people would. His constitution was not built for lingering in regret. But he carried it forward with him, added it to the accumulating clarity of the week, and let it do what it needed to do. Later that afternoon, he called Marcus and told him to clear 2 more weeks of meetings. Then he called the director of Blackwell Holdings Philanthropy Office, a woman named Dr. Yolanda Crane, who had been trying to get 30 minutes with him for 8 months, and told her to come to the estate the following Tuesday. He had something he wanted to discuss. "Should I prepare materials?" Dr. Crane asked, in the careful voice of someone who had learned not to get excited prematurely. "Yes," Raymond said. "Community-level social infrastructure, housing stability, family support, youth programming. Bring everything you have." A pause on the line. "Yes, sir." And then quietly, "Thank you." He hung up and sat for a moment in the library with Elaine's novels around him and the sound of the piano coming faintly from the receiving room, where Sophia was practicing something unhurried, finding her way through a melody, one careful phrase at a time. It came up on Thursday, which was 5 days after his return. They were in the garden, or rather Sophia was in the garden, and Raymond had come to join her, wearing old clothes borrowed from the storage room that fit him imperfectly and felt pleasantly strange. She was working on the south bed, clearing the dead stems from the autumn perennials and turning the soil around the hellebore roots with a small trowel. She gave him a trowel and showed him what to do, and he did it badly, and she corrected him, and he did it less badly, and the bed progressed. "Can I ask you something directly?" he said. "You usually do," Sophia said. "I mean, are you all right, financially?" He turned the soil carefully the way she had shown him. "I don't mean are you comfortable or are you wealthy. I mean, are you okay? The apartment, the bills, the cost of living in Harborview." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "I'm okay," Sophia said. "It's tight. Social work doesn't pay the way it should, and Harborview is expensive, but I manage. I think," she considered her words, "I think there's a kind of clarity that comes from managing on what you earn. Everything has weight. Everything you choose to spend is a real choice, not an automatic one." "Your mother was like that," Raymond said. "Even when we had more than we needed, she was careful with things. She said it kept her honest." "She told me that," Sophia said. "She told me a lot of things when I was old enough to understand them. She knew she wasn't going to have as much time as she wanted." Paused, hands still. "I think about that, how she must have been thinking about it the whole last year, knowing the numbers, being a practical person, and she spent that year doing exactly what she always did: the garden, reading, being with us, making things beautiful. Raymond was still. The trowel was in his hands, but he wasn't moving it. She didn't change, Sophia said. She just kept being herself, fully. She looked at the hellebore root she had just uncovered, dark and dense and deeply embedded. I think about that when I have hard weeks at work. I ask myself if I'm doing what she would have done, just being fully in it, not looking for the exit. You are, Raymond said. I can see that you are. Sophia looked at him again, and again he got the full weight of it, the direct, serious, warm assessment. Coming from you, Sophia said, that means a lot. And then she went back to the garden, and so did he, and they worked together for another hour in the comfortable silence of shared purpose. On Saturday, Sophia taught him to bake bread. This was not something either of them had planned. It arose the way the best things that week arose, from a simple, unscheduled morning and two people paying attention to each other. Gabriel had his day off. Raymond had come downstairs to find Sophia in the kitchen, looking through the pantry with a focused expression, and she had said, without looking up, that she was going to make bread if there was yeast, and there was yeast, and she had asked if he wanted to help. "I've never made bread," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm offering to show you." He helped. She showed him how to proof the yeast, how to measure the flour with the flat edge of a knife, how to work the dough, not just fold it, but push the heel of your hand down into it, feel for the moment when it changed from sticky to elastic, when the gluten developed and the whole mass became something alive and responsive. "You have to feel it," she said, watching his hands. "You can't just follow a timer." "That's not how I usually work," he said. "I know," she said again. She was not teasing him. She was just observing. He worked the dough. It was harder than it looked. There was technique to it, pressure and rhythm, and he got it wrong for a while before he got it approximately right. He felt in those 20 minutes something he rarely felt, genuine uncertainty about whether he could do a thing. It was a small thing. It did not matter in any measurable way, but the smallness was part of the point. "There," Sophia said, after a while. She touched the dough lightly, pressing one finger into the surface and watching it spring back. "That's it. That's what you're looking for." They left it to rise on the counter, covered with a clean cloth, and sat at the kitchen table with coffee. The November sun was coming through the kitchen windows, stronger than it had been all week, and the kitchen was warm. "I want to ask you something," Raymond said. "All right." "When you were growing up, the years after your mother, was there anyone you went to, a teacher, a family friend, someone who—" "Mrs. Abernathy," Sophia said immediately. "My art teacher in 8th and 9th grade. She knew, I think. She always found reasons to keep me after class, just to talk. She wasn't overly concerned or clinical about it. She just—" Sophia looked at her coffee cup. "She made me feel like I was interesting, like what I thought about things was interesting, like I had a perspective worth having." A pause. "I think about her when I work with kids. I try to do that, make them feel like they have a perspective worth having." Raymond was quiet for a moment. "You didn't know about her," he said. "You couldn't have," Sophia said. "We didn't talk about things like that." "We talk about them now," he said. She looked at him, and the familiar, careful warmth was there. "Yes," she said, "we do." She looked at the covered dough on the counter, the slight dome of it already visible as the rise began. "Things can change. That's what I tell the families I work with. Things can change if you work at them." She looked back at him. "I believe it for them. I'm starting to believe it for us." "I believe it," he said. "Good." She stood up and went to check the dough, lifting the edge of the cloth to see. "It's working," she said, satisfied. The bread came out imperfectly. The bottom was slightly overdark on one side where Raymond had miscalibrated the oven, and it rose a little lopsidedly, and when they cut it open, the crumb was denser than it should have been. But it was real bread, genuinely made from scratch by two people who had fumbled through it together, and it smelled, when it came out of the oven, like something ancient and correct. Sophia buttered a slice and handed it to him. He ate it standing at the kitchen counter, and it tasted the way things taste when you have made them with your hands, and someone who matters to you was beside you when you did. "Not bad," she said, eating her own slice with the honest assessment of someone who did not give false compliments. "Not bad," he agreed. They smiled at the same time. It was, he thought, the most ordinary moment of his year, and one of the best. On Friday evening, Sophia found Raymond in the library. He was sitting in the armchair that had been Elaine's. Not reading, just sitting. There was a glass of whiskey on the table beside him, and the room was lit only by the lamp near the chair and the last gray light from the window. "You look like you're thinking," Sophia said from the doorway. "I am," he said. "Come in." She came in and sat on the small sofa across from him, curling her feet up the way she always did, and she didn't ask what he was thinking about. She waited in her way. "I've been reviewing the terms of the foundation, the Elaine Blackwell Foundation. I want to do it right, not the way I've done most large things, not from the top down, with strategy and metrics and outcome reports. I want to do it the way you do it." He looked at her. "I want to talk to the people it's meant to serve before I design anything. I want to talk to people like Carla." That's a significant ask for someone in Carla's position to sit across from a trillionaire and talk about her life. "I know," he turned his whiskey glass. "I'm not suggesting I put her in a boardroom. I'm suggesting we think about how to do it properly, with her comfort and her choices at the center of it." He looked at Sophia. "I'll need your help to understand how." She studied him. He could see her weighing it, not his sincerity, which she had apparently decided to take at face value, but the practical complexity of what he was describing. She was working through it, like she worked through every real problem, methodically, from first principles. "I'll think about how it could work. No promises. It would have to be entirely Carla's choice." "Of course. And you'd have to be willing to be wrong, to listen to something that didn't fit your assumptions and change the plan because of it." "I've been doing that my entire career. It's how I've survived in business." "This is different," Sophia said. "In business, when you're wrong, you adjust a strategy. In this," she looked at him directly, "when you're wrong, you adjust yourself." He sat with that. The fire had died down in the grate, and the room was cooling slightly, and the window showed a dark sky with a few stingy winter stars. His daughter sat across from him in the lamplight, clear-eyed and direct, telling him a true thing. "I know," he said. "I'm willing." She held his gaze for a moment longer, and then she nodded, not a concession, but an acknowledgement. He had passed some test he didn't know he was being given. Or perhaps it was not a test. Perhaps she was simply watching him arrive, the way you watched a ship come into harbor after a very long voyage, noting that it finally, actually, was here. "Good," she said. She unfolded herself from the sofa. "I'm going to make tea. Do you want some?" "Yes, thank you." She left for the kitchen. He sat in the armchair that had been Elaine's and looked at the darkened window and thought that of all the structures he had built in his life, the companies, the contracts, the global projects that would power homes for 100 years, the one taking shape in this house this week was the one that felt like something that would last. He got up to help with the tea. He was learning how.